some slides giving additional advice on the assignment. And again, it's worth looking at the slides with the assignment advice. Okay, hi there. So I'm just talking through what we covered last time. I think you were all here, you've got the assignment instructions already, yeah? So the assignment advice, it talks about the choice of organisation, which is crucial. One that you're familiar with, one where there's public information about the company and its finances. And almost always that will mean a publicly quoted company, one whose shares you can buy on a public share market. A couple of you came up afterwards and said, is it alright if we use a privately owned company? And yes, providing there is some public information, so I can show the company exists, and that there is a financial statement that you can access to understand the company's situation. So the choice of organisation. I've just written down some of the organisations students have used in the last 2 or 3 years. This is not a recommendation. Okay. Some of those students got good marks, some of those students didn't get good marks. Some of the companies may no longer exist because they've gone bankrupt or been taken over by another company. A little bit about the time scale, and trying to get you to focus in on a fairly short-term time scale for these IT initiatives. The reading material, the course sets are in the library, but you will need to research some specific topics, maybe some further information about applications such as EAI, ERP, CRM, VLE, and indeed, you know, quite what these TLAs actually stand for. Who knows what TLA stands for? This used to be part of the culture. Three-letter acronym is a TLA. Of course, there is inflation, and so in a number of cases the acronyms have got more than 3 letters. So sometimes you see people talking about an ETLA, which is an extended 3-letter acronym, meaning an acronym that's got more than 3 letters. So some of you may be thinking, oh, but I don't really know enough about the kind of initiatives. So there is that list in the instructions that you can look at online. And there's also the books. These are the core texts. This book by Gelati is also a good one, but it hasn't been updated so recently. But both the book by Chaffee and Gelati have got a lot of case studies, and they've got a kind of framework for thinking about where e-business might apply, whether it's in, for example, the supply chain, how a company receives the raw materials, whether it's in e-procurement, buying stationery, other items like that, digital marketing, customer relationship management. So there's a kind of structure that helps you think about where e-business might apply. And in this book, in each chapter, there's a number of case studies, some longer, some shorter. This book, there's 19 quite extended case studies. So there's plenty of examples that can inspire you to think, how can e-business improve the organisation that I have chosen? And basically that's the goal of the assignment, is for you to make an argument, how can e-business, some aspect, make a difference to the organisation that you choose. And then there's some more advice. Think of new initiatives and be quantitative. Where can you get the numbers from? Often it will be from a case study. Some other organisation has adopted the approach that you're suggesting, and they've seen benefits like this, a 5% boost in their profits or whatever. And you can translate that across to your own chosen organisation. So having some case studies is good, and particularly if those case studies are detailed enough to have some quantitative information. And then there's other information. Other bits of advice that you should take note of, so do look at those slides in detail, more detail than I'm covering here. Question?
You said you need to prove how e-business will improve the organization that
Yeah.
you are assignment from. However, most of the organizations have already, have already further step towards becoming an e-business.
So the question is, the point is that most organisations have already made a start toward e-business. Well, there's two parts to that. One is, it's true, most organisations have, but there's some organisations which haven't. So you can choose an organisation which is less advanced. And the other thing it says, have made a start. And even organisations which have made a start haven't necessarily adopted e-business in all the areas, such as the ones listed here, and there's more detail if you look at this book. So the areas of e-business might be supply chain management, e-procurement, digital marketing, customer relationship management, and so on. So there's a whole lot of areas. And when you look at a company as an outsider, you may think, oh, they've got a website. They've already done e-business because they've got a website. But actually, there's a lot more to e-business than having a website. Even if they have a website, what does that website actually do? Does it just tell you about the company? Is it marketing or promoting the brand of the company? Or does it let you interact with the company? Maybe you can buy goods or services. Does it let you discuss those goods or services? Have they got any social media presence? I think the reality is that most organisations you'll look at have made a start, but there's still more that they can do. And so your task is to identify areas where they could improve or do something new. But absolutely, you know, if you pick the wrong organisation, you might think, oh, they've done everything, I can't make any suggestions. Okay, pick a different organisation, there's millions of companies to choose from. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But what about if the organization that you're recommending are your POCs, topics, or business already have adopted one tool, but the research last thing.
Well,
you didn't know about it, or
yeah,
during the period of time that you're doing your assignment.
Yes, okay, so the question is, what happens if you're busy recommending customer relationship management, and in the middle of this module, suddenly the company announces, oh, we've got a new CRM system, we're just rolling out. Okay. Providing that when you started, it wasn't already known, then I'm perfectly happy with that situation. It's the same situation I mentioned yesterday. You know, what happens in the middle of the assignment if your organisation goes bankrupt? Well, I'm going to let you continue with the assignment and I'll mark your work and I'll give you credit and ignore the fact that that organisation no longer exists.
Well, perhaps you can claim that I recommended to them and they adopted it.
Well, yeah, okay, so this module asks you to act as a consultant. If you actually have been working as a consultant and you've been earning money, making all these suggestions, and they've adopted one of your suggestions, well, good luck to you. But that's what you're doing in your life outside of university study. I'm simply going to mark your report, and I don't need to know that you're earning money acting as a consultant for this organisation. All right. So I was going to say something about this, yeah. So do make use of the research. There are case studies. Mostly the case studies talk about successful projects. So that you can find some which talk about, well, we tried it and it didn't work because of these reasons, that's also very, very valuable. One particular difficulty is that a vendor who's selling the technology, of course, has an incentive to publish all the successful case studies. So I'm sure if you look at Oracle's website, they'll tell you about all the people who are doing wonderful things with their database. They're not going to tell you about the people who struggled and couldn't make it work for them, or found it too expensive or too complicated to maintain. Okay. So where you can, find independent sources, market surveys, analyst reports, academic papers, so that you get a more balanced view of the technology than just the vendor's own white papers. Okay. There are these slides, and there is more in the assignment instructions that I've handed out. So do in your own time, look at the full set of assignment instructions and the advance that I've given in full. I've only covered a bit of it here. Because I wanted to go through and carry on with the main slide, we looked at the module organisation, and now some more business concepts for today. So I've kind of touched on, and no doubt you're aware of, all aspects of a business or a company, and that's quite a lot of material, and I can't cover all of it. And really, we're talking about strategy, senior management, and executive decision making. So that's our topic. There's this notion of a business model, and one way of capturing a business model is to fill in a table like this. And this sort of table is what's used when people are proposing a start-up business, and it's really trying to get maybe non-specialists to think about all the aspects of their business, like the costs, sources of income, the value proposition. What is the main purpose of the business? To serve your customers better. Well, who are your customers? Okay. Well, the people who want lemonade on the go, this lemonade stand, this sort of fake business. So what are the resources, what are the kind of relationships, what are the channels that are used to sell and market that product? And if this stand is in a park in a town or city, then the particular market segment is the park visitors. Okay. So that's one way of understanding a business model, or thinking about putting together a proposal for a new business. But the main elements really of a business model are these three things. The key activities, what the business does, what's the value proposition, which is closely associated with those key activities. So it's a lemonade stand, we understand what its activities are and its value proposition, and then the business equations that form the model or mathematical or financial model. So when people talk about a business model, they're not just thinking about the spreadsheet, they're also thinking about the activities and value proposition. But at the heart of any business, there has to be some kind of spreadsheet whereby there's a profit, which is income minus costs, and that's going to be the same equation for any business, and then the income probably is the number of units sold times the sale price, summed up across all the different things that the business sells. And that would be an equation that would apply to a kind of retail business, not necessarily a service business where the revenue for the service business might be through customer contracts, and it might be a little bit more complex than just talking about number of units sold. But a sort of retail or manufacturing business, it's what you sell, how many you sell, how much you charge for each item you sold. So that's the income. There may be other sources of income, earned interest, rebates from the tax person, etc. But usually those other sources of income are additional, extra, and a little bit unpredictable. The costs, well, we've touched on in the various businesses that we talked about, the capital purchases. So a cruise line like Capital, it's very intensive, capital intensive. huge amount of money invested in those 100 cruise ships. How does that depreciate? What does the value of a cruise ship do over time? Did they borrow money to build those cruise ships? How are those loans serviced? If it's not a capital intensive business, then those things probably don't matter, but all businesses buy raw materials, consumables, printers, printer paper. They have employees, they pay wages or salaries, they lease or license software or their business premises, they do marketing, and then there's all the other unavoidable costs of life, some of which you have to pay as individuals, like tax, insurance, painting the house or painting your shops or building, dividends. If you're a shareholder company, you pay dividends, they become a cost, paying lawyers to defend yourself against legal cases. So that's really the summary of the business, and when you've understood the main items that feed into the income and the cost, then you understand the business model. Question?
You split those costs into 3 different types. Is there a reason for that? Is there like different names for those types of costs?
It's just because I could sort of fit 3 bullets on the slide, but as it happens, certainly that first set of costs is all about capital. The second set of costs is kind of a cost of running the business, and then the third set of costs is like the overheads on the running the business. So there's sort of a classification. And when you look at company accounts, then the headings tend to be similar for different companies. Certainly different countries might account in slightly different ways. So you see some similarities, but not always the same cost structure. And sometimes slightly different language as well. What you're proposing will be evaluated as a business investment, and an investment is assessed by considering the return on investment. And as you know, if you put money into a savings account, you might get 1% or 5%. If you borrow money, depending on how you borrow it, you might have to repay at 10% or 17% or something. The advantage of putting all those numbers down as the percentage, the return divided by the investment, or the repayment divided by the total of the loan, the advantage is you can compare these things. So if somebody starts talking about lending you money and saying, oh, you only have to repay £1 a day, that doesn't sound too much, but turn it into the annual percentage and then think about it. You can make comparisons if you use uniform measures, and the measurement for investments and loans is this annual percentage. Okay. Now, the board of the company will have a range of proposals, and they will select a few to go ahead with. A big company will have quite a lot of projects on the go at any one time, your goal is to ensure that your proposal is one of the ones which is selected at that board meeting to invest in. Now, funding a company, again, that's a whole topic. There's lots of ways that businesses can have finance to invest in their future. The simplest way is to reinvest profits. And most likely that's what they would do for an e-business initiative. And why is that? Because there's a certain element of risk. The board of the company has to manage risk. So borrowing lots of money on an e-business initiative whose returns are a little bit difficult to predict, that would be unwise. It would be risky to borrow lots of money for an e-business initiative. So it's safer to reinvest money you already have, reinvest the profit. These other sources of finance you should be aware of, but it's unlikely that's what the board will call on. It's not really your concern where the money comes from, because that's for the board of the company to manage, except that if it's likely that your proposal is funded from profit, then you should consider how does the sum you're asking for compare to the annual profit for the company. If what you're asking for is the whole of the annual profit, it's got to be a pretty good initiative before the board would agree to use the whole profit one year and invest it in your proposal. If it's a more modest amount, like half the project or half the profit or 10% of the profit, then it's a bit easier for the board to say, yeah, we can use 10% of our profit and put it into this proposal, this project of yours. Now, in the beginning, a company had to define what it was for, and then to do that job the best that it could for as long as it could. And many companies survive for decades or hundreds of years just doing one thing. But actually, capitalism is really about finding better ways to do the same thing, finding new ways of satisfying customer demand, offering new goods, products and services that didn't even exist before. So that actually new businesses come along and replace established businesses. And that's fundamental to capitalism. And this phenomenon was recognized and given the name creative destruction. A new business is created and that destroys an established business. So that's what creative destruction means. And then this notion fed into a way of thinking about business strategy from Porter, the five forces model, with the main way people think about business strategy. And there's some empirical evidence that shows capitalism and creative destruction are becoming more intense. So this statistic here, the top 500 companies in the US, the Fortune 500, tend to be the same year on year. but some of them drop out. So people have looked at how long does a company stay in the Fortune 500. And kind of if you go back 100 years, and then you look for the next 75 years, well, that's sort of the median time for those older businesses. But more recently, the median time in the Fortune 500 is decreasing, and these days it's down to about 15 years. So you could make it to the top, and, you know, if you're lucky, stay at the top for 15 years. And that's because other businesses will come along and replace you. So the intensity of change is increasing. And that's why a well-run company has to invest in business change projects. So a business change project is adding value by decreasing cost, increasing income, and often they are initiated by people within the organisation thinking in an entrepreneurial way. So there's this word, I'm not sure it's officially a word, but an intrapreneur is someone who acts in an entrepreneurial way from within the organisation. And this is probably more common than starting up your own business. Sometimes companies bring in external consultants who propose these business change projects, and that's the role that you're playing in this coursework, these assignments. Okay, so businesses that don't reinvent themselves will fail and be replaced. That's what creative destruction is. So Porter's 5 forces are captured. Here's one diagram for them. There's a threat of new entrants, new companies come along. There's a threat of substitutes. Things like a desktop computer were really important, but these days people want laptops. Oh no, but people don't want laptops anymore, they want to have smartphones. So the desktop computer has been substituted not once, but twice in a period of 20 years. Other things that impact on your ability to make a profit are the amount that you can charge for your products. If you can charge a higher price because you've got a strong brand, then it's easy to make a profit. But of course the buyers want to buy things at a lower price. And at the top you have the same dialogue with your component suppliers. Can you get the components you need at the right quality for a lower price? So how do those negotiations happen with suppliers and with buyers? And then within, even ignoring all those other forces, in any marketplace, there tends to be a number of vendors. And over time, some vendors do better, some vendors do worse. So your business success will go up or down depending on how well your competition are doing. So those are the 5 forces Porter identified. And they feed into business strategy. A little bit more about creative destruction. So a business has a kind of life cycle, it grows and it shrinks, and if it just carries on doing the same thing, eventually that business will disappear. Or it can find a way of doing something different and go on to a rebirth. And this phenomenon is called jumping the S-curve, and it's been studied by Harvard Business School and other researchers. So the business that's successful keeps going by moving on to new products, services, new revenue streams. And so instead of dying away, it can keep growing bigger and bigger. And in Silicon Valley, there's lots of case studies of this. Back in the 20s and 30s, the focus was on vacuum tubes, a product that barely exists anymore, test equipment, microwave defense, integrated circuits, personal computers, the internet, social media. And particular companies in Silicon Valley, you can say, oh, you know, back then, when it was all about microwave valves, there was this company called Varian, which was the leader and really important, but none of you have heard of it. Electronic test equipment, HP, semiconductors, Shockley, Fairchild, Intel, personal computers, Apple, Cisco, well, the network, Sun, just computers, internet, Google, eBay, social media, Facebook. Okay, so those are some companies that were successful in their time. Some of them survived. Shockley, Fairchild, Sun no longer survive. So a lot of businesses, after 50 or 100 years, just disappear. But some of them survived because Varian moved on from microwave valve to medical equipment. HP moved on from test equipment to computers and then consulting. Intel first made memory, RAM chips. Not very profitable, so they moved on to processors, and that's been very successful for them. Apple jumped from making computers to consumer electronics, and now arguably selling apps is a successful line of business for them. In other words, those companies that have survived have often or typically done it by moving on to different business models. And that's why business change projects are really crucial for the long-term survival of our companies.
So, taking that into consideration, when do you think a company should start thinking about one of these?
Yeah. So when should a company start? Well,
Because you can't really predict your life.
exactly, yeah. So one way would be to say, well, let's sort of wait till we're beginning to decline, but that's a bit of a risky strategy. So really, you should be starting to think about business change as you're becoming mature.
Yeah, but you don't know you're coming to
Yeah, okay. So even when you're growing, you need to think about business change, because if you start with a company, you've got 5 people in a little office, the way that you run the company is very different from when you've got 50 or 500. So actually you have to change the business even as you're growing. And if you look at startups, quite often a successful startup begins with one idea in mind, but that doesn't quite work, so they tweak it a little bit, and then that works for them. So you have to be prepared to change really at any stage. The switch to a whole new business model is kind of a drastic change, and maybe that will happen only at this point later on. But smaller business change projects are going to happen at any stage from pretty well any business. So we haven't got time for the activity. Apologies, I've been talking too much. But eBay is a sort of interesting company because if you look at its revenue, it seems to have been growing at least up until 2014 very happily. but more recently, really the revenue is quite flat. So that's a company that's got to the stage of not growing anymore. And then the blue bar is earnings or profit. And this year they made a very healthy profit. The next year hardly any. The next year quite a decent profit. So that tells us that what we need is more recent data, whereas the data for 2016 probably not quite ready yet, not been published. To my mind, eBay is an example of a company that's starting to plateau. And so it needs to be thinking, what should it be doing differently? One strategy is to say, well, we'll just carry on doing the same thing. We'll try and manage our costs a little bit better so that the profit is more predictable. So if we've got flat revenues, we should be getting a fairly stable profit, but not if the costs are going up and down. So that would be one thing, just say, we're a mature business, we'll keep going, but eventually, and probably sooner rather than later, eventually that will disappear and eBay will no longer exist as a company. They'll move from maturity to death. Or the alternative is, well, what can we do to switch to a different business model that would power further growth? So the activity we haven't got time for was, what is the time? 44, yeah, I think we've got to the end. So maybe sort of between now and next week, you can think about the situation of eBay as a company, whether there is something they could do that would keep them going and growing, or whether their only alternative is to carry on in the same business and eventual decline and disappearance. Okay, so that was about why business change projects are important, and of course that's the goal of the assignment, to keep up a successful business change project. Thank you.
And then around 5 or 6 o'clock we go back and say everything